Look at that. Aberdeen. A place of zen, equilibrium, tranquility. There's a land of culture in Aberdeen. Look at these ducks. That's beautiful. But that's just it. There's equilibrium. Is there perhaps too much equilibrium?
You are smack dab in a heavily glaciated northern Great Plains.
And those cracks happen, those are going to reparticle, and you're going to pick them up in your tires and drag them away in, so that's where the potholes come from.
This land is beautiful, but it's just plain flat. When water falls here, it has nowhere to go. I set out with my buddy Morgan and my camera to find a satisfactory answer to the question that's been bugging our brains since the day we plopped our suitcases on campus. Why is Aberdeen so flat? This is me. I think my name is Trevor. I usually hang out back here though. I'm not much for being in front of the camera. I'm the abstract thinker. And this is Morgan. She's the logical mind behind this whole operation. If not for her, this video would have half the substance and watchability. So thank you, Morgan. When approaching this project, how do we make a story about Aberdeen? We set out to visit David Gretler. His office was kind of messy, so we put him in front of a bunch of books.
So I'm a historian who teaches geography, who likes geography, but I wouldn't call myself a real geographer. So
David Gretler is a geographer, a veteran, and a professor at NSU. He told us a story leading back 2.6 million years.
They'll borrow a geological term called MYA, million years ago. But we don't understand what a million is.
Yeah.
So when you look at people, people are starting maybe 15, 20,000 years ago, and the Pleistocene and those that transition from Pleistocene climates to Holocene climates is a huge thing in human history.
The Laurentide ice sheet is basically what happens when the Canadian glaciers left over from the Ice Age melt and smear the landscape of the US like a hand going across a sandbox. This left behind water, fertile soil, and tons of rocks, among other things.
So that's 2.6 million years of stuff moving around. So you get a 5 to 10 degree change in temperature overall. In the colder periods, the ice piles up, it doesn't melt, it grows. And this is an area that's been glaciated through at least 20 glacial advances. But when the glaciers get bigger in advance, in that next warm period, they also retreat and come back. So this has been scraped back and forth, north to south, east to west, even a couple different times. So every time that glacier advance came, it would grind off the high spots and the soft spots. When it retreated, it would melt and fill in the low spots. And if you keep scraping away the high spots and filling in the low spots, you are left with the flat spots. So there we go.
When we received this project, we weren't sure how to make a story of a landscape. Do we tell it with culture? Do we tell it with weather? Or do we tell it with philosophy? We visited another professor from NSU, Greg Blair, a Canadian professor of art. How would you describe the environment and topography of Aberdeen to someone who had never been to Aberdeen?
Flat. I think that's the word that comes to mind for most people right away, but I think of it, and I think that's accurate, but I also think of it as like expansive.
We decided because he hasn't lived in Aberdeen his whole life, and this is the flattest place he's ever been, Greg could shed some light on the culture aspect of the land around us.
So that's what I was going to talk about, is the flip side. Like, if we just talked about these things have sort of influenced, art from California, what has been the flip side for, not just South Dakota, but I always think of it as like the Upper Plains region because it's very similar. But what part of the landscape has helped define what South Dakota art means or South Dakota culture means. I think there's some key that I always turn to, some key figures like Harvey Dunn. I think, some of his paintings are these iconic South Dakota, embracing the prairie, the vastness of the prairie.
What excites me the most about this project is the opportunity to learn about the shift in culture we could have experienced had the Laurentides not melted. How do you believe South Dakota culture is shaped by the land around us?
That is an interesting question that I think needs further exploration, actually.
The Laurentides. This is such an important part of our landscape, of our culture. Why haven't we been learning about this in school?
Oh, we should have T-shirts with a Laurentide ice sheet, and we should have the Wisconsin event in it too. The best part of Canada scraped off and came down here. So thank you, Canada.
We went to visit Sue Gates from the Aberdeen Dakota Prairie Museum. She told us one of the most important stories of our bigger story. So your family has lived here for a few generations?
Well, in the area. My parents came here in the 40s, but they were from Gettysburg, Oneida.
To tell a good story about the Brown County, I feel like we need to start here. There can't be an audience connection without a personal story. I realize I can sit here and tell you that the Laurentides melted. We can visualize it in as many ways as we want. We can all relate to the human condition.
I think the prairie is one of the most beautiful places that you can be. And part of that is because it is so flat.
And so I'll tell it like this. It's a story that should involve family.
And I just think of the farmers, which to you guys would be ancient history, but to me would be more my grandparents that were on the farm in the 30s during the Depression. And there was no rain, and there was, general financial fiasco in the country, and how they survived just barely, but they believed in it so much that they really did try to hang on until they absolutely couldn't hang on anymore.
A story that should involve brotherhood.
There was a time, like right after the Indiana Jones movies came out in the 80s, that being an archaeologist was a lot of fun. And it was a lot of fun, but it was a great hobby and a rotten job.
Oh.
I didn't have any of the stability of a university because it was all soft money. And so when we had money, everybody dug, it was great, but then we didn't have any money, and I'd have to lay off people that were like family to me, and my soul couldn't take it, and I quit. I couldn't take it. It was awful. I mean, people that you've lived with under combat conditions, people that, saved your life out in the field. It's like, Angie, I got no more money. Like, yeah, I know you ain't got no money. I can't pay you. And I swear to myself, I will never do that again. So I'm going to go teach.
It's a story that should involve travel.
This guy from Seattle, he was at, well, where are you from? And we were kind of talking about it. And he asked, well, I wonder what a philosophy of the Dakotas would be, or a philosophy of the prairie. And I thought, that's a damn good question. That's a good question to explore. Somebody should take that on as a project.
What would the philosophy be?
Yeah, like what would be the tenets of that philosophy?
The only way to truly understand an area's topography is to also know its way of life, from a wide cast of characters who you may have never even spoken to.
Well, I think this is just a great city to live in, to work in, to visit.
Aberdeen may be flat, but the people you will meet are far from two-dimensional.